The impressive clergyman. But you know the actor's name? What? Nope. Peter Cook. My goodness gracious. No more money. No more money. No more money. I owe her $10 and I will pay her. Y'all remind me. That's exactly. It's a hilarious movie, by the way. It's rated PG. Obviously, Dixie's seated. It's a fun slapstick movie, and it's kind of a hoot. And the preacher that does the. I thought we had the impressive clergyman. Where is he? Where'd Traver go? Where did he go? He's hiding back there. There he is, the impressive clergyman. Okay, yeah, exactly. All right, so that quote was from that movie. I pulled up a few other quotes about marriage. And see if you can tell me, except Dixie. Nobody else. Anybody else is open to this. If you can tell me who said these. Pardon me. Love is like a beautiful flower, which I may not touch, but whose fragrance makes the garden a place of delight just the same. Talking about love in marriage. Love is like a beautiful flower, which I may not touch, but whose fragrance makes the garden place of delight just the same. Dixie, any guesses? Helen Keller said that. From Alabama, up in Florence, Alabama. Powerful quote there for her. Here's another one. For it was not into my ear you whispered, but into my heart. It was not my lips you kissed, but my soul. Albert Einstein said that about love and marriage. A couple more here. To get the full value of joy, you must have someone to divide it with. Mark Twain said that. Here's one. I like this one. If I get married, I want to be very married. Audrey Hepburn said that. Love has nothing to do with, can somebody get me a glass of water, please? Love has nothing to do with what you are expecting to get. Only with that, what you are expecting to give. Catherine Hepburn said that. Two more. When a man opens a car door for his wife, it's either a new car or a new wife. Thank you. Prince Philip said that. Not Prince Andrew, who's been in the news quite a bit lately, but Prince Philip said that. Last one. You're happier if you remain unmarried. If you marry, you will have trouble in this life, and I'm trying to spare you. The Apostle Paul said that. Let me read that again. You're happier, and I'm paraphrasing a lot of what he says in chapter 7. This is not a direct quote, but he brings this up several times in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. You're happier if you remain unmarried. If you marry, you'll have trouble in this life, and I'm trying to spare you. Now, we had a wedding recently right here in this building. If I recall, the impressive clergyman did not bring up that scripture. There he is again. Every time I bring up impressive clergyman, you walk out. If I recall, you didn't use that passage in your wedding ceremony, did you? Did not use that in the wedding ceremony. And that whole 1 Corinthians chapter 7 is about that. It's talking about in the beginning part of that, the book, about marriage, about avoiding sin and having self-control and the lust of the eyes and lust of the flesh, and to avoid that, get married, is what he's talking about at both ends. And at the end, he actually says, I think in this case, the virgin is happier if she remains unmarried. And he says, that's my opinion. So strong language there about marriage. Marriage is one of the most important parts of what we do in church, as part of church. So goes our marriages, so goes our church. So goes our marriages, so goes our church. As an elder, counsel a lot of people about a lot of things, and probably the most often used topic, or what comes up most, is about marriage and marriage issues. And problems with marriage are rampant, as we all know. Unfortunately, I think usually today, often what happens is we have a couple and the man falls away to some degree. And we have young women or old women who are trying to walk with the Lord and have a man that's away. That's not always the case. It's not 100%. But I see that a lot in our culture for whatever reason. It seems like the men have not held up their end of the bargain. And the woman hasn't either in a lot of cases. But a lot of what we deal with is women who are trying to cling to a biblical family, biblical marriage. And it's just the man should be leading. And in many cases, the man doesn't lead. And the woman is struggling by herself. The design is that the man should lead in the marriage and in church and in other ways. God has a plan, and when followed, it works. And we deal with that quite a bit. So goes the marriages, so goes our church. So goes families and life. As you look around and your friends, the marriage rules and how it's done. It's not because man came up with marriage and how God designed it. He instituted marriage, as we all know, in the Old Testament. He said, the man shall not live alone. We know the verses. God, it's his institution. It's the first institution, and God made it. So go the marriages, so go our church. So go the marriages, so go your kids in child raising. One of the biggest challenges that people have in raising their kids is the marriage is not good and the kids suffer. Guys, many of the problems we have with our kids and raising them, from temper tantrums to bedwetting, are cured when the man and wife have a strong marriage. Even bedwetting. I'm not saying every time, there's always some physical things and outliers, but many of the common problems that kids have and that parents have in raising kids is because the husband and wife, daddy and mommy, don't get along, and the kids see it. And there's no security. Kids get their security from a secure marriage, from mommy and daddy who love each other, from mommy and daddy that show that that relationship is first, second only to God. But in the family, mommy and daddy come first, not kids first. When you put the kid first, the kid becomes a little God. And when the kid becomes a little God, eventually the world tells them, when at some age, you're not a God. Sit down. But when they're raised to be little gods and that they're the most important relationship, and when the mommy and daddy are talking and the kid has the right to walk up and interrupt any time during any conversation, and the parents always stop and whatever the kid wants, and they realize they're more important than mommy and daddy's relationship, the kids suffer. Mommy and daddy do that out of love for the child with good intentions, but they're hurting the child because the child gets security from mommy and daddy loving each other. Mommy first. It's a great, men need to memorize that sentence. It's easy to memorize. Mommy first. When they interrupt you, mommy first. Unless you're on fire or the house is on fire, if I'm talking to mommy, you can wait. They need to learn that order. There's security in that for them. Now, obviously, daddy first too. Not practice usually. Anyway, so go. I'm not getting off from child raising, but so go the marriages, so go the kids and the raising of the kids. Most of our marriages are stuck in this rut because it's biblical. We know from the garden that God created marriage and the fall happened and he put a curse on the man, right? You will live by the sweat of your brow. You will toil and work. And the woman, he said, your desire will be for your husband, but he will rule over you. God set the responsibilities. And that desire is not a sexual desire there. Most would agree, that it's a desire to rule over. The woman, and here's where most marriages collide. And this is the rut. All marriages struggle with this to some degree, but they get off the rails as the woman wants to rule. How do I know that? Because God said, your desire will be for your husband, but he will rule over you. And the man gets caught up in the world and working and toiling and sweating. And then that's the Old Testament story in the fall. But in Colossians, it says, wives, be submissive to your own husbands. So this is fitting in the Lord. Wives, be, I think it's used subject in the New American Standard, to your husbands. This is fitting in the Lord. It is fitting. In other words, God said, I designed it. Be subject to your husband. This is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, right after that, he says, husbands, love your wives and not be embittered against them. Listen to that. Husbands, love your wives. We all know from Ephesians, husbands, love your wives across the church and gave himself up for her, all that. Husbands, love your wives. But in Colossians, Paul says, and not be embittered against them. Now, why do I bring that up? That's where the rub is. The woman's want to rule. It's in her. And the man gets embittered against the woman trying to rule. And oftentimes, because they get caught up in the world so much by the toil and sweat of their brow, and they pour themselves into that and work and forgo their wife. They're not loving. Husbands, love your wives, and not be embittered. And so most marriages and the problems are flowing out of those two things. The woman wanting to rule and the man is embittered. And then so you get stuff in the world like, my ball and chain. That's the nickname for the wife from, in the movies or maybe in real life, of the men at work and complaining about their wives, which you should never do, men. We all have arguments with our wife. You should never open up our laundry at work with other men. And likewise, the women, the same. That's where marriages fall. It's in those two things, which are biblical. And you probably all know, and men, I'm sure none of the men in here, because we're all almost sainthood in here, right? The men in Grace Chapel, but you get embittered against your wife because of the things they say and they do, and sometimes they manipulate, or they don't understand how hard it is and the pressure it is as men, and other men have better jobs and bigger things, and I'm trying to catch up or whatever, and the woman's trying to, because she's not feeling love, she lashes out or she wants to control everything you do. And men, what you see in men is they are embittered. That is where men, that's what's going on in most marriages. And it ebbs and flows. Some of it, even the best marriages, the man gets embittered. In the best marriages, there's something in a woman that wants to rule over the husband. And women do it by different methods. Some of them just take control. Others manipulate. There's all kind of, and that's where it's not any more complicated than that. Now, it squirts out of that like a watermelon seed, and you try to grab it in all different forms and things that happen in the marriage. But guys, you're living in that right now. Guys, when I say guys, I mean guys and girls. What are you laughing at? Most impressive clergyman. So go the marriages, so goes our church. Every church has marriage problems. Every marriage has marriage problems. It's just different degrees of it. Because we're two sinful people put together. You've probably heard of the book or read it, and a lot of the counseling we do, when, the book entitled, When Sinners Say I Do. I can't remember the author's name of it, but it's a good book about marriage. And it makes a point that there's no better place on the planet to display grace than in marriage. Because you take two sinners and you put them together and they see the worst of the other one. And to fix that, they need to be pouring out grace upon each other. Giving them grace, what they don't deserve. Not having to win every argument. Anyway, so goes the marriage. So this 1 Corinthians chapter 7 passage is so controversial. Paul says this, I think then that this is good in view of this present distress, this is verse 26, by the way, that he remains as he is. In other words, unmarried. I think then, in view of this present distress, that it's good if a man remains as he is. Now, there's a lot of different views on what all this means, because it's not a popular passage. The impressive clergyman didn't use it in the wedding. When you go to sermon audio, normally if you pick a verse, you want to hear some sermons, there's like 4 pages, 112. On this verse, on this section, there's 3 sermons from the whole world on sermon audio that would dare talk about this whole idea of marriage. And Paul is going, you're better off if you don't marry. So there's controversy about it. One of the things they look at is, he's just talking about the current time in Corinthians. Obviously, before 70 AD, they wrote, Paul wrote to them, and the church was going to, the whole Roman Nero and all that was going to happen. He's relating it to that. Other people relate it. And so when it says in view of this present distress, so it only applies to them. There's one slant on that. The other is it's pointing towards a remarriage. If your wife had left you or divorced, it's saying it's okay to remarry under the right circumstances. And all that's, I'd agree with that under a biblical divorce. All those things can be true, but I think the context of it's just about marriage. Because it also says the virgin, somebody that has not been, it's not about divorce. It's better if they don't marry. I think it's just about marriage in general and distress in general. We might not have the distress at this point as they did in Corinthians, but we've got distress, and other distress may be coming. So I think then, in good of this present distress, it is better that you remain as you are. If you're married, if you're bound to a wife, do not seek to be released. If you're released from the wife, do not seek a wife. Then he says, if you marry, you've not sinned, and if the virgin marries, she's not sinned, but such will have trouble in this life, and I'm trying to protect you or try to prevent you from having to go through all that. Such people that get married will have trouble in this life, and I'm trying to avoid that for you. And Paul, in case I'm running out of time here, I think he sets the highest standard, like he was a single person. It's okay not to get married. And some people pretty much marry the Lord and just follow the Lord, and that's okay. That's a high standard to be called. Most people aren't called to do that, but it's okay. And those are saints that they're walking with the Lord. That's an awesome place to be. And he sets that up to be like me in that, but he also says, if you marry, you've not sinned. And if the virgin marries, she has not sinned. That's a strong thing about marriage. You don't hear it talked about that much because it's somewhat controversial. It's just saying you're going to have trouble. It ain't easy. Joe and Chloe aren't here. We could probably ask. They've been married, 2 weeks? I bet you they've already had a little spat. Maybe not. I don't know. But it just comes with the territory. He goes and say, the time's been shortened. From now on, those who have wives, here's where it gets, those who have wives should be as if they did not have wives. Oh, take that home to your, I can go home to Sherry. From now on, it's going to be like she's like, yeah, we need to talk, What does that mean? From now on, those who have wives should be, there's a streaming going? Yeah. Sherry, didn't mean it. I'm going to straighten that out here in a minute. Those who have wives should be as if they didn't have none or didn't have a wife. What is that talking about? The next few verses bring the context in that I think make it clear. He goes and say, those who weep as though they did not weep, and those who rejoice as if though they did not rejoice. See, it's not talking about this definite, forget your marriage. It's making the point there are things that are more important than marriage, and even weeping, and even rejoicing in the good things and weeping in the bad things, and it's God, right? He goes to say, those who buy as though they did not possess. And I think the last one really clears it up. Those who make use of the world as though they did not make full use of it. For the form of this world is passing away. And that's another verse I think that talks to, it's not just about that time. I think that's more of an end times type. The form of this world didn't pass away in 70 AD, but it will pass away, the form of this world, when Christ comes back. But listen to that. Those who make use of the world as though they did not make full use of it. So what is the point? And it also applies to the whole thing about marriage. Marriage is not the end all. In our culture, people get married, and some young men and a lot of young women, all they want to do is get married, and that's their whole goal. And that's all they seem to care about, when the Lord should still be above marriage. Now, those who think they build up marriage, they do it in the Christian way, but some women get married and just stop their growth in the Lord because they just want to be a wife, which is great, and they want to be a mother, which is great. But their relationship with the Lord is more important than even both of those. They still need to be digging in the Scripture. The point is being made there by Paul. Nothing should come before our relationship to God. Our marriages are, in our culture, Grace Chapel, we have some really good marriages. But in our culture, marriage is all out of whack. So goes our marriages, so goes our church. Those who are unmarried, Paul says, are concerned about the things of the Lord, how they might please the Lord. But those who are married are concerned about the things of the world, how they might please their husband or their wife. And their interests, and I'm quoting right out of 1 Corinthians, are divided. The woman who's unmarried and the virgin is concerned about things of the Lord, how she might be holy both in body and spirit. The one who's married is concerned about the world, how she might please her husband. He makes this, and I'm going to wrap it up here. He makes this is Paul kind of says, let me stop and this I say for your own benefit, not to restrain you. A lot of times the truths of God, especially in teenagers, I'm going to be talking about some of this when we do our young adult conference, some of these same principles. Young adults, kids, the things that their parents teach them and the church teaches them feel like a restraint. Why do they put this restraint on me? Teenagers are like, you're holding me. I want to go do, and I want to. Paul says, this I say for your benefit, not to restrain you, but to promote what is appropriate. And this answers it all, to secure undistracted devotion to the Lord. That's what the whole passage is about. And some people put their marriage ahead of it, and it's distracted devotion. They're still Christians. They're still in a church. They still do the same. But Paul is saying, father, mother, husband, wife, he's not against marriage. If it distracts you away from the Lord, it's wrong. This I say for your benefit, not to put a restraint on you, but to promote what is appropriate and to secure undistracted devotion to the Lord. So go the marriages, so goes our church. If all of us would secure and do these things, devotion to the Lord, first of all, the marriage that you are so poured into to want to make it successful would be more successful. If that relationship is first, your relationship to God, then your relationship to your spouse, and then your kids are more healthy when they realize they're below that. They're not little gods. People have kids, the first kid, they're married and they hold hands, husband and wife. They have their first kid, they put them right in the middle, and they're the happy family, and everybody's happy. And they have another kid. Before you know it, they have all these kids, and guess what? The husband and wife are like, are you still over there? Don't reach anymore, but we're worshiping our kids. The kids are somewhat happy, whatever, and the kids see their husband and wife, their marriage is like, it's all about them, and they suffer for it, and they have tantrum, all the stuff that comes with it, when the kids should have seen mommy first. Unless your room is on fire, I'll get to you in a minute. Daddy first. Mommy and daddy are having mommy daddy time. Don't bother us. Mommy first, daddy first. And then that kid is secure, and they're bold, and they're confident around other kids, and they're not worried because mommy and daddy's yelling at each other all the time in their marriage. They're secure in it. They're healthier. And they don't wet the bed, and all these things that we struggle with. Anyway, there's an introduction to marriage. I just stirred pot. Now Michael can come straighten it all out when he gets back and starts on marriage week after next or whenever he finishes it. So with that, we'll close it up. Prepare your hearts to worship here in 15 minutes. You're dismissed. Morning.